CenX, real talk
at the heart of your community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gerard. And good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining the CenX podcast launch event live. And we've got a wonderful audience in front of us today. And my name is Muhammed. Rauf. I'm Director of Business Development at Centric and the CenX podcast platform. We have with us our founder and host, Dion Tansey. I wanted to give a bit of a backdrop before I pass over to Dion about podcasts and why they're so important. Because, you know, at Centric, you know, we're a community research organization. We build the capacity and capability of local people to solve their problems through research. And a really important aspect of this is around cultural knowledge production. If we don't tell our story, someone else will. So we do this through the research, through the literature reviews. It's about giving a platform to our communities to have a voice. Now, we do this through our reports and through our literature reviews. But one of the projects where we've been exploring more creative methods around how this is done is called dissemination of knowledge. Because as one of my partners has said to me most recently, and they do say at times kind of, look, the 60-page report is great, but we're just going to read the executive summary recommendations and get on with it. And if I've got partners with, you know, some of the institutions that I'm working in saying that they haven't got time to read through a whole report, when we speak about mental health, which is what we're here to speak about today, how can we expect the community to be reading that 60-page report? How can we expect those who are going to be most impacted by some of the changes, some of the outcomes, to read that? Well, the answer is a lot of them aren't. They haven't been. And at Centric, we focus on this concept of nimble knowledge production. Is how do we disseminate knowledge, share knowledge with our communities in bite-sized, accessible chunks via creative methods that are the community is already engaging with. One of those ways is via podcasts. Hence, the innovation of the CenX podcast platform. I'm going to stop there, and Dion, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, I'd love to say thank you for everyone for coming. It really does mean a lot. Today is the CenX podcast event launch. So I think it is only right that I explain or share my story with everyone here and how we actually got to this point. I will be honest, the start of this story isn't the best, but I promise it does get better. And yeah, I'm just really appreciate that everyone's come today, and I hope that you'll hear my journey and see how we got here. So the CenX journey, I guess, probably started 2 years ago, and 2 years ago I didn't even know what Centric was, so it started back then. It was 2021, around this time, I'd started implementing these new habits into my life. I like to practice gratitude daily. I like to meditate, go gym early, that sort of thing. And, you know, like everyone says, when you get to a new year, you want to New Year's resolutions and all that. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But I had a really good feeling about 2022. I don't know what it was. I just thought, I'm doing all these habits now. My life's feeling good at the moment, and 2022 is going to be a year that something really happens, something really changes. That plan failed by January, to be honest. Unexpectedly, but things you don't expect, everything that's to come. So, and the day that I'm going to speak of, I remember this day very clearly, and I probably will do for the rest of my life. It was a Sunday morning, literally about 6 a.m. And I remember being woken up from a call by my grandma. And to be honest, I was thinking it's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and there's no way I'm talking to you right now. Like, I'm going to go back to sleep. But then she called again. So now I'm thinking, it's 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. There's no way you're ringing me twice for no reason. So when I answered, my grandma had said to me that my mother had been out on the night before and that she had been assaulted. So instantly I got up, as you would. I've asked where she was and just send me the address, whatever, I'll come there. When I got to the place, I didn't really ask any questions about the address, to be honest, because I probably wasn't in the right headspace for that at the time. When I got there, I found out that what she actually meant was that my mother had been sexually assaulted that night and she was kidnapped as well. So at this point, to be honest, I can't remember much after that of what I said or what I was feeling, or a lot of that is a blur. I did have to wait a few hours to see my mum that day. And I'll always remember the first time I seen her, the first word she said is, I thought I was going to die. And I don't know how are you supposed to cope with that. Like, that woman is everything to me. So that just broke me, to be honest. That is a very low point in my life, and having to see her that day and the months after and just not really recognizing herself and not being the same as she was before, it really did hit me bad. And with my mental health, or if I've ever had to discuss a problem, I've always had my family there with me. But with this situation, my whole family was going through it. So I felt like I can't go to them with this problem because they're all feeling the pain I'm feeling, and it'd be unfair if I put my pain onto them on top of whatever they're already thinking, whatever they're feeling. So I kept it in, and at the time I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that's the best way to deal with things and just get on with life. And then a few months after this had happened, I actually split up with my girlfriend at the time of 4 years. And honestly, that didn't do me any better. That didn't help me mentally, emotionally, but these things happen. And I remember being in a job at the time that at this point, the only reason I was doing it was for the money. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I was going in every day, putting on a brave face, acting like everything was cool, but really and truly it wasn't. So out of nowhere, pretty much, I just decided to quit. And at that point, I decided to quit. Future planning or any views on the future of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to be, I didn't have any at all. I didn't think anything really of my future anymore. I couldn't really see past the current situation I was in. I didn't make any arrangements to get another job or anything like that. There was just nothing at that point. Some of you may know my uncle is Dr. Sean Dankwa, the founder of Cen-X, and he is the brother of my mum. So he'd come to see us one day. We went for a meal, and he spoke to me a bit after, and he said, "Oh, will you meet me tomorrow, and we can go for a talk and stuff like that?" So I said, "Yeah, cool." I didn't have a job, so I had a lot of time so I could meet him. And I just remember that day that he was just talking to me. We had a general chat. He knew I liked to read, so he took me to a bookshop, bought me some books, and we just had a good chat, had some food and things like that. And then he started talking to me about Cen-X and research and all this that he had going on. And at the time he was telling me, I actually couldn't think of anything worse. I just thought that research, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going around doing interviews, and the work, I don't think it's going to be for me, to be honest. But then he added in that they had blogs and things on a website explaining what Cen-X was, the work they were doing. And he said, "Why don't you just read them?" Because he knew I liked to read. So he said, "Why don't you just have a read of those and just see what you think?" I did have a read, and quite surprisingly, I actually liked what I was learning about. And I thought, you know what, this actually sounds really cool. But the only thing that I didn't really see is where the youth fitted in with what he was doing. And it didn't really seem that there's a lot of youth work involved in it. At the time, they did have a youth division coming up, but it wasn't a definite or anything solidified. So I said I'd sort of give it a go. I'd come in and I'd see what it's all about. He knew I didn't have a job at the time, so he also asked me, like, really and truly, like, at some point you are gonna have to do something, and asked me if I had any ideas of what I wanted to do. And I'd thought of an idea where I wanted to go into schools, and I wanted those habits I was talking about, that daily gratitude, meditation, things like that. I wanted to go into schools with a program where I could teach that to kids in the schools, preferably secondary schools, and I thought that'd be a really cool idea. And I decided to, Sean like encouraged me to set up a company for it, and it was called Real Life Curriculum. And for the rest of 2022, because I think I met with Sean in about August, that was all I was planning for. So January 2023, I was gonna start Real Life Curriculum. I was gonna reach out to schools in December and get all of that done. With Real Life Curriculum, I probably got to December and I hated the idea of going into schools completely. I didn't want to do it, and I just didn't. Something didn't feel right about it. But at the time, I was watching a lot of podcasts, so I thought, what if I just started a podcast instead? And I spoke to one of my friends, and I said, "Would you like to host a podcast with me?" And he said, "Yeah." So we decided that will be the new route that we go down. So instead of launching in January, we'll give it a month and we'll launch in Feb. So Real Life Curriculum, we actually recorded my first podcast with mics like these. We had them attached to my windowsill in my bedroom, and we just started talking. I think the first episode was about mindset, and we just started talking about mindset, our own, people would learn from. And at that point, it was just voice audio, so we had no visuals. It just went on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And that was the first episode out. We created Instagram, and we thought, let's just give it a go. Within a month, there was a podcast studio that opened where I lived in Leicester, who invited us down and said, would you like to come try the space and record here? We record like video record, we deal with the editing and all that. So we thought we'd give that a go. Went well, really enjoyed it. And Real Life Curriculum was something that gave me a sense of, actually, I could see myself doing this in the future, and I want to continue and keep pushing it. So we started that in February. We're now in December. We're like 43 episodes in. We've had amazing guests on there. It might not sound a lot to some people, but we've got like 800 followers. And honestly, from when you start from zero, it's amazing. And everyone that's been like supporting us along the way, it's been brilliant. And I've really found a passion for it, and giving people a platform to share their stories and give them a voice and let other people know what they do. I think it's amazing. So with Real Life Curriculum, it's just keep pushing, and we can see where we can take it. Going back to Centric and how the two link up. When I first started with Centric, the first thing I did with Centric was actually in this room. It was a youth project, and I met some really like good people. First time I actually met Mo as well that day. And I remember it, and I still was a bit skeptical, to be honest, even when I came here. But I thought, you know what, I haven't really got a lot going on right now. I'm at least going to give it a go and see what we can do. So, and to be honest, I'm not going to lie as well, because Sean was my uncle and he's the founder of the company, I thought at least he's just going to help me out and pretty much give me everything that I need and just make my life easier, to be honest. He didn't. He threw me literally in the deep end, and it was probably the best thing he ever did, to be honest. I'm really glad he did that. And we both are big fans of a guy called Jim Rohn, and I actually had to remind myself of a saying of his, which is, don't wish things was easier, wish you were better. If he gave me everything, I wouldn't have learned, I wouldn't have grown. We probably wouldn't be here today. But the fact that he didn't, I had to build those skills for myself with the help of the Centric team and the projects I was involved in. I had to want to do better. I had to learn new things. And yeah, I wasn't at the time, but I'm really appreciate what he did. So my journey with Centric, I first went on the cost of living project. And I remember being at a focus group and hearing people, like the struggles they're going through and how tough things actually were for some people and the sacrifices they were having to make. And I thought that focus group was the first time for a lot of them that they had an opportunity to speak, an opportunity to let their voices be heard. And something with that just didn't sit right. I feel like there should have been something or somewhere where they could go and they can express their feelings more. They can openly speak on what they're passionate about and what they're going through. And there should be a platform for that. But at the time, it was just a thought and nothing really went further. I continued with the projects I was doing. The team took a liking to me and I was invited to do more projects, and the interviews I didn't want to do, I was actually doing, and I was actually asking for more. And yeah, everything was just going well, and Centric really helped me. It made me look forward to the future and look forward at things and actually see some sort of light. And they really made me feel welcome, and I will always appreciate that. So because I was doing real life curriculum on the side and that was going well, we seeing what that could do, and I was doing the work with Centric, it sort of made sense that we make a platform or we come up with some sort of concept where maybe we do a podcast or maybe we do some other sort of creative output where people are actually given a platform to speak, people are able to let their voices be heard. And from my involvement as well in the projects, I always wanted to know who sort of our partners were, who we were working with. And because I was a community researcher, I would never really speak to whoever we were collabing with or anything like that, but I'd really wanted to. Like, I wanted to know their side of things, why they wanted to do the project, what their reasons were. So in my mind is that same platform, I wanted that to be a platform where it was able to bridge the gap between like institutions or partners and like members of the community. And myself, because I wanted to know a lot of things. So I wanted to ask them all the questions that I wanted to ask. So we thought we will set up a podcast, we'll set up a platform, but we had no idea what we were going to call it at all or anything like that. I do have to thank Sam, who's not here at the moment, but Sam helped me come up with the name of CenX. And yeah, CenX was born, and we recorded some podcasts. We made the Instagram and the platform, and we started putting the stuff out, sharing it with the team, sharing it with others. And yeah, I enjoy where it's going. But with CenX, definitely, I feel like we can go so much further with that. So we're here today. We've got to this point, and again, I really do appreciate you all coming. And this will hopefully be the start of an amazing journey with CenX, and I really hope it can do amazing things. And one thing of how we got to this point and my own story and my own journey, I'd love that to be the same for so many people who come onto the platform or work with us.
Where did the name CenX came from? So you alluded to it, that Sam helped you do it. Sorry, I hold a lot of details. You alluded that Sam helped you do it, but you didn't actually say where you got it from and why it came up and the reasons and what it stands for and what it represents.
So with any sort of subgroups from Centric, it always starts with Cen. So we knew it had to start with Cen. The X part just...
Can I ask you to ask the question and then answer it?
Okay, yes. So where the name CenX came from. So as I said, any subgroup of Centric always starts with a Cen. With the CenX itself, Sam literally gave me a number of ideas one day, and that one sounded the best. Where it came from, I'd have to ask Sam, but it was brilliant from him, and we really liked the name, and we just went with it, to be honest. So, thank you.
Come on, more questions.
Okay. So I'm always being difficult. Let me not be so difficult. So my question is, the platform, why this type of platform to address, I guess, some of the issues that your community is facing? Why this particular type of platform?
Like a podcast.
Yeah.
So why we chose this platform or to do it in a podcast form, when I was doing my own episodes with Real Life Curriculum, I quickly realised the power of giving people a voice and giving them a chance to actually speak their truth as well and what it can do for them. So I thought with the work I was doing with Centric and sort of connecting the two, I just thought it'd be really powerful. And like Mo said, with sort of the reports and things like that, like I don't want to be reading a 60-page report. So if we could find a way as well where we could creatively get across the details in that report, but in a way that it's not too much, it's not just overwhelming, we thought this would be one of the best ways to do so.
Dion, could I add to that? Because sorry, I'm going
that's
for
fine,
that.
no problem.
Yeah, so I think it's really important what you've said, and upon reflection, in Centric, something that's really important to us is around like ideation within the team and actually having those conversations around a given topic. And I think for me, upon reflection, like watching back some of the podcasts that you've kind of already done up until this point, it really brings the work to life that I think can't be done in a paper format or in any other format. I think actually bringing, whether it's partners, whether it's members of the team, like actually sitting down, having that conversation around a given topic. When we did the podcast with Annie Norton from the Integrated Care Board, Rebuilding Trust, it brings a different, I think, understanding of the nuance of the topic,
Yes.
which I think is important considering what the type of topics that we explore. They're so complex. Everyone has a different perspective. I just want to add that.
No problem.
I have a quick question for you both. What is your proudest moment in Centric? What is the proudest thing that you'd love to tell the world that Centric has done or stands for? Repeat it.
And can I have a question after?
Yes, indeed.
Mo, I'm going to let you go first.
Dion, you need to go.
Okay.
You need to go first.
My proudest moment so far, probably this current moment, because it sort of brings the whole journey together. And this time last year, I wouldn't have seen this happening. So I'd probably say this current moment is definitely the proudest.
Can you repeat the question?
What my proudest moment in Centric is, there isn't one because there's just loads of different ones along the journey. So I remember when I was first starting doing interviews, and we're here speaking about mental health today, and I understood the importance of giving others a voice, but actually it helped me to bring out my own voice, because some of these issues growing up, cultural stigmas, we don't talk about it. And I realized by helping others to speak, it gave myself a voice. And I realized actually that was being replicated across the team. So as I've grown, every time I see like someone in the team doing something new, going out their comfort zone, taking ownership of something, leading a new project, which, I think we can speak about a bit more, explore a bit on the podcast. Here, today, this is one of my proudest moments too.
Thank you.
How is CenX now involved in or reaching out to the youth?
How CenX now is reaching out to the youth. So we have a plan where we want to build a team, a creative sort of comms team around CenX, who we work with constantly. And youth engagement is one of the top things on that, because it's Centric. We sort of want to, initially when I came in, it was CenX, but I think we'd now like this to be the platform for the youth. So how we're doing that is, it's a work in progress, and we're looking to build a team around that and hopefully expand and engage more youth in what we're doing and the agendas that we discuss.
Any more questions?
What does success look like for you?
Me individually.
Well, for CenX.
Or CenX.
You, like, what does that look like?
what CenX looks like, well, success looks like for me is I've never really thought about it too much, to be honest. I just like to see the platform. The vision I have for it in my head is that it's a platform where it can bring people together. People's voices are being heard, and I'd love for the fact like institutions would see it and partners that we work with see it and realize what the power of it is and be able to help us grow with that. Yeah, I'd like to go with that.
Cool. Mo, you?
What does success look like? For me, I think it's building upon the work that we've done, scaling and replicating. Nationally, internationally, what we're already doing with Giving. I think in terms of CenX, is Dion, I can see you managing a team of hosts, hosting different CenX podcasts in different nations, on a monthly basis. I think you could turn it into a show. It kind of becomes a show in that way. I think there's so many possibilities, and I think, through what I've learned on this journey so far, that there is nothing that we can't do. It's what we put our mind to, and we will make it happen. And I think CenX is already a testament to that. And it's looking at what's the next mountain we're going to climb, and we'll work out how we're going to climb it.
Any more questions? No? Yeah, one more question. Final question before we shoot. Yeah.
I'm going to challenge you now. What do you think differentiates CenX from other podcasts? So there are other podcasts that have chosen, I guess, similar audiences to yourself, and are quite topical. There are podcasts that frame their topics around mental health, well-being, progression, success, intersectionality, all of these different things. So in a market that is quite saturated, what differentiates CenX?
Well, one of the main things I think that will differentiate CenX from other podcasts is, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I haven't seen a podcast-like platform come from a research company, well, community research company, where they were able to engage institutions with members of the community. Like, I've never seen that conversation happen. So I think for me, that was a big thing, the fact that the people in these communities where they're affected by the issues going on in their local area or personally to them are actually speaking to the people who have the power to actually change it and actually do something about it. So I think for me, that is the main thing that would differentiate it.
Thank you very much. So we're back. So, Tiers, could you give us a bit of an introduction into your work?
Yes, that's very important. But I'm based at London School of Economics, the Care Policy and Evaluation Center, and the work we do revolves around the economic aspects of health and social care. And then you can think about how expensive a certain treatment is, but also you can think about how much does it cost to an individual to reach care. And then you want to help with your analysis. We seek to help people or policymakers or managers or care organizations up to individuals to identify how they can best their own resources to maximize the help that they can get. And you do it in various ways. You can you analyze the economics, or you can set up an experiment, you can model a future cost of care, and so on.
We've got a lot to talk about today.
Hopefully.
Esther, could you give me a bit of an introduction into your work?
Yes, with Centric as a community researcher and a naturopathic nutritional coach and chef. So what does naturopathy mean? It means we tackle the root causes of diseases rather than treating the symptoms. So let's take, for example, someone has got diabetes. Why does the person have diabetes? What is causing it? So once we tackle the root cause, then you are able to reverse it. And what I'm doing with Centric is now we hold nutritional talks at St. Giles, where we support members of the community. We try to equip them with tips, nutritional tips, lifestyle changes, recipes, so that they can take control of their health and well-being.
Thank you, Esther. So with that in mind, Dion, I'm going to hand back over to you.
No problem. Just on your work, Esther, I was thinking, does what we eat or what we drink, does that have any effect on mental health?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%.
How
I'm
so?
looking at the alcohol and I'm scared to talk, but yes, whatever we put in our bodies has direct effect on our mental health. Take, for example, sugar. You eat sugar and you get the rush. So all carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. And carbohydrates is our potatoes, our yam, our rice, our pasta. Once we eat carbohydrates, it's broken down into glucose. And what the body does is it takes what it needs. So glucose gives us energy. So the body will use the glucose in it, all the excess, it will push it into storage as fat. And if the carbohydrate eaten is too much, then insulin, the body will release insulin. And the body releases, the insulin that is released is directly proportional to the amount of glucose that's being produced. So if the glucose is too much, a lot of insulin will be released, and insulin will push so much into storage that you get a dip. That's why sometimes you finish eating and you have the sudden surge of energy, and after about 10 minutes, you feel sleepy. If this goes on for a long while, the person becomes depressed. So that's in a short way how directly what the person has eaten is affecting his mental state. And so is sugar. Same as alcohol, unfortunately.
Definitely something I needed to hear. Not technically what I wanted to hear, because I really love sweets. To be honest, I can't lie, sweet tooth's crazy. But yeah, thank you for that, Esther. Tiz, I wanted to ask you if, with the work you do, does mental health come up a lot, or does it come up as any part of that?
Yeah, so we study care, and mental health is one of the prime burden of disease. That's and we study around what the economic aspects are there. So how does mental health prevent you from participating in the workforce, or how much care do you need, etc. So mental health is a very important subject.
And I see a lot now, more places, more organisations sort of encouraging people to sort of speak out about mental health or anything like that. So for yourself, how important do you think it is to actually speak out in regards to your mental health, or if you are struggling with anything?
I think it's important, particularly if you seek to achieve improvement in your mental health. Like if you want to keep quiet, you'll be quiet. But if you think that it leads to better outcomes for you, the first thing you need to do is identify that you might suffer from something, and then reach out. And the idea is indeed, and research shows that also, that, and you talked about it in your example earlier, that in the condition of mental health, you might prevent yourself from doing stuff that could bring you forward in your life. You don't seize the opportunities that might be out there, educational-wise, job-wise, well-being-wise. So yes, it's important.
And could I jump in and ask, because you mentioned the cost. What's the cost of, I guess, either not being diagnosed or the cost of mental health around that aspect that you've just mentioned?
Of not calling it out?
Yes.
Well, you'll suffer. Well, the first cost that many people have in mind is that you might have to seek therapy, right? If you take it in a broader context, the cost of mental health is, just as I mentioned, people are less able to to educate themselves or find proper work or stay in their jobs, which to that is costly to them, and you can also argue that it's costly to a larger community or society. But I think you always have to look into it initially from your own point of view. And that goes back to also what the cost of mental health is. So you can even include a proper nutrition as a cost component. Those who are for whom healthy nutrition is more expensive are more likely than to suffer from mental health, and then actually are less likely to overcome mental health because they don't have the finances or the resources to find proper food.
And I was going to ask you, Esther, in terms of if someone is struggling, in your opinion, where would you say the best place is to go, or the best place where you can actually voice what's going on, what you're feeling?
Best place to go, I'll say start with your immediate family. Anyone who will listen, because you will never know where help can come from. I will take a typical example. A friend, we were just chatting and she was like, I had a really rough night last night. I'm like, what did you eat? And she was like, what has that got to do with what I ate? I'm like, oh, it's a lot. So she told me, and it was carbohydrate dense. I'm like, this can affect your mental health. That's why you had the rough night, because remember when I explained how glucose is broken down, when you get the dip, it can wake you up and interrupt your sleep, and you wake up. So ideally, when you have a good sleep, you should wake up refreshed and energized. But if your sleep is not good, then you wake up and you feel lethargic, you feel tired. So just by talking about this, we went into what she had eaten. She was like, oh, I didn't know that. And so anyone who will listen, I'll say, talk to them.
But I think, isn't that the barrier sometimes, especially, look, I can speak, I'm a kind of Muslim Pakistani man. Culturally, there's a stigma around speak. So it's interesting you mentioned, like, go to family first. Actually, it's not spoken about. Typically, traditionally, it's not spoken about at home in the family. It's interesting you mentioned a friend spoke to you about something, because, and I think even in kind of my experience in social circles, it's easier to go to a friend than actually to go to family.
That's what I'm saying. Whoever will listen, whoever you are closest to, who will listen. Because most of the time, the things that goes on in our head, most of the time they are not true. We make it so big than it really is. So when you speak to a friend and they bring your attention to, oh, actually you're exaggerating, it makes you calm down a bit. But if you are by yourself and you are going over these ideas over and over, it blows out of proportion. That's when, unfortunately, we have things like suicide and stuff like that. But once you talk about it, when you can find help to maybe all the things you were making up, because there's been research that says that most of the things that we dwell on in our past, they are not true. We keep repeating things and blow it out of proportion, and it becomes so much that we think we are the most unfortunate people in the world. But when you talk about it and you hear even someone's story, you realize that actually I'm blessed. So talking about it is definitely very important. Whoever will listen. So if you can't talk to family, friends, and that's another important bit about this podcast we are doing and what Centric is doing, creating the platform where members of the community can come to the experts in Centric and they can find help.
Well, I got a question for you. So, in terms of mental health, what is your experience been with it, or your knowledge of it?
So my experience personally, as I said, growing up in South London, especially, due to some of the discrimination that I faced. And actually, I think growing up, I had a beard from like 14 years old. So, but it was internalized a lot of the time, to be honest. And you I guess there's a strength within internalizing. And that aspect that I think I discussed in the intro about being able to give others a voice through the research then made me more comfortable, I think, understanding kind of some of the impact of those experiences on myself. But then I guess going into the research aspect, I mean, we've recently concluded some research with King's College Hospital Foundation Trust around the Vital Five. And mental health continues to be an area that people are not comfortable opening up about with practitioners. I think there are a number of key influencing factors into why they may not be comfortable in a consultation room. As some of them have expressed, as some of the research participants expressed, a perceived feeling of a lack of care or empathy. And if you don't feel cared about, how are you then going to open up about something that's so deeply personal to you? But then for some of those who have actually gone through the process, they found the process can be quite slow. Meanwhile, for those with quite severe mental health, it is a detriment to their health, and actually it can add to it because there's a looming expectation. You're waiting for that letter to come through. You're waiting for that appointment that comes in 8 weeks' time to follow up on kind of what. And then I think even, and Tia's, we were speaking about this, I think, before we started, that even when there is access to, when you get access to services, sometimes there's a limited number of options available. And if you're at a lower income bracket, you're just confined within those limited options.
Yeah, I think you want a purpose you might have as a society, that everybody has equal access or an equal partner to be able to speak to, who is empathizing, who is understanding of your needs and understanding of how you communicate. And that's very difficult. It could be your parent, it could be your friend, but it could also be not your parent or your friend. And then you need to rely on maybe the care system or the care provider. And is the care system or care provider and the individual practitioner ready and sensitive enough? And that's very complicated. And then that's my objective in things, is that you want to make sure that everybody has equal access there, because mental health is already disproportionately affecting some people. Then you don't want to make that lead them to even have less equal opportunities in the future relatively to others. And how are you going to manage that? Maybe this helps as a platform, at least to voice that it is a problem, and it's a problem within a certain audience that you're targeting. And I think that's a very good initiative. It will become important indeed that you also start to reach out what Mo does and what you've done with your research, getting into practice and see how can we then make sure that they match up, that the care professional knows who they have in front of us, but then also that the person who comes with the mental health issue knows how to voice him or herself. It's very complicated.
I want to touch back on what you were saying there, and what would you like to see as a solution for the problem, I guess, in regards to not having people not feeling comfortable or not having the full trust in sort of health institutions maybe, and not feeling open enough to actually discuss what's going on?
Well, I think Tia's has articulated the complexity of the issue. I think the solution might also be just as complex. But, in terms of looking at some of the literature, and I know like Joe Whaling has explored kind of this, and this is new to kind of the Metascape around restorative practices, which is about rebuilding trust between the community and whether that be health practitioners, those working on the front line, but overall between health institutions and communities. But this concept is actually quite new to the medical sphere and is something that's been done in more kind of extreme circumstances, for example, like post-conflict, where people have been through conflict and you kind of have a survivor or victim kind of going through restorative practice with kind of the perpetrators. I think that's one potential solution to one part of the issue. I think there is also an approach of how do we approach kind of mental health with a culturally competent lens. Because of the stigmas that we've mentioned, for example, everyone experiences it differently and they require a slightly different solution. You know, some people just won't be comfortable speaking about these issues in a clinical setting. But I think as we're already exploring in Centric, okay, what do some of those alternatives look like? So we're piloting a new program titled Trauma in the Booth, which is an innovation by one of our team. And that is an approach to actually get people to firstly speak up and overcome that stigma by producing music, by turning it into music lyrics, by doing something that's enjoyable. It's then allowing them to open up. And that of course, will turn into, you know, published music, an album, and then there's an income stream from that. So that's one example of a different approach that we're taking. I think it's important that we kind of test and pilot these new approaches, while also looking at some of the existing things that community is already doing. Like, you know, and it's been said to me many a times, the barbershop or the hair salon is actually the perfect place to have a conversation around mental health. People come and express their problems there all the time. So, but how can we have approaches like that adopted into mainstream healthcare?
I definitely think from this current conversation, projects that I've been involved in with Centric, it is clear that there is a distrust between like communities and health institutions, and like not fully going with the services that they're providing. So clearly we have some sort of trust to rebuild before I think we can even think about solutions. I think rebuilding trust is, as we spoke about on the podcast we did as well, I think rebuilding trust should be at the front, really, for if we're going to get anywhere. And obviously it will probably sound biased from me because I'm the podcast host, I like podcasts, but Esther, in your opinion, do you think like a podcast is something that we can use to help these institutions actually engage better with the communities that they're trying to engage with?
Absolutely. Because once it's being spoken about, people will say, oh, actually, I'm not by myself. Other people are going through this, and through that, it helps others break their ice and feel comfortable to talk about it. So I feel this is creating the platform and also making it easier for people to talk about mental health. That it's not a stigma. Brain health is very important. So once people see that someone who looks like me is talking about their trauma, their experiences, then it makes it easier for others to also open up and talk about it. So I think this is a really good platform and in the right direction to help curb the stigma attached to mental health.
And in your experience, have you actually seen any platforms that are currently doing that at the moment?
No, not that I know of. I know of Dr. Daniel Amen. He's in the US, he's a brain expert. He's the one I know who is doing something like that, but he teaches what people should do in order to have a good brain health. But not that I know of that anyone doing what we are doing. So, yeah, I feel blessed and to be part of such a great initiative. Yeah.
And Tiz, would, again, just find a question to you. Do you think that a podcast or a platform could be a good way to start rebuilding that trust between like these health institutions and members of the community?
I think a podcast is a good thing. I do think that there are things out there similar already, maybe not for a specific target or an audience that you seek to target. Whether or not it will lead to a rebuilding of trust, I think that's a very, very big ambition. I think you should, if we talk about knowledge dissemination or implementation of stuff, which is also part of my work, you need to be very clear and very specific, but also in a way narrow in your objectives. So you have to be very careful in what you set as a first goal with the podcast. I think voicing stuff, I think it might be a perfect thing for it to do. And then you can find 1,000 ways to do it. Whether it leads to trust building, well, a first thing with trust building, and that goes back to your story about conflict resolution, is you have to have partners who set as a common goal that they want to establish mutual trust. And whether or not a podcast leads to that, that's a bit far-sighted, right? So think smaller. The fact that you have people here in the audience also that come from different backgrounds with different experiences, that's already very awesome. And that's an accomplishment in itself. And that we speak out, that's an accomplishment also. But to go all the way further and then envisioning some system change or something is a bit far ahead. So think smaller, and then actually you will be much more successful, I think.
And with the work you do, have you seen taking smaller steps instead of just going straight for the goal, like the big goal? Does that work in what you currently do?
Well, the research shows that. So if you want to accomplish change in practice, for example, it's the small things that matter. It's the having pioneers in place, a leadership that is supportive of change. Well, that's how I would see this podcast, or I'd see the research organization CenX in itself. It's a pioneer in establishing that a voice needs to be established for a certain community, perhaps, through research. I think that's really awesome. It's a very nice initiative. And the literature shows you need to start very small, and then hopefully it leads to something. Might also lead to nothing. I hope not, but no, but then at least you've been busy.
True.
No, but it's awesome, right?
Thank you. Mo.
Well, I just wanted to
if you've
ask
got- no, if you've got a question,
another
yeah,
question, because so you said kind of that leaders and the pioneers
Yeah,
as one element, but then I guess inherent in what you were saying, I was asking myself the question, well, then do we need leaders and pioneers like working within the different institutions, like at a systems level, to connect with?
yeah, but you are working in the system and you are pioneering. So you could be the leader and the pioneer in this care system. Through the way in which you work, through the way in which you combine it with the podcast and the idea for research, and the audience you seek to target. So I think that's a perfect start. Let's say, well, how much else can you do? You can't start already a claim. An ideal situation would be that you ask for huge amounts of funds to change everything and the perception of everything of everybody and everybody's behavior and knowledge and insights. You can't account. That's impossible. So this is a very nice start. And then just see how it goes and expand and do it thoughtfully. Line up the podcast with the work that you do in terms of research and establishing the relationship with institutions. And through that, indeed, bring in the podcast to show this is my audience. I have a reach. We are able to voice a certain voice.
Can I say something back to your question whether podcast is the way forward? And there's this guy who was on Ellen's show, the guy who committed suicide. I don't know if anyone knows his name. I don't remember his name, but he was so bubbly, and you do dances and stuff on the Ellen DeGeneres show. No one knows about him. There was this guy on the show, Ellen's show, but he committed suicide. And the day before, he had been on the show, danced all bubbly and happy. And when he committed suicide, people came out talking about their mental well-being. And, Ellen's show is such a broad show, and it opened the platform for people to talk. People you wouldn't think are going through stuff. Like Mo said, most people in our background, the BAME community, they are stigmatized when they come out to talk about their mental health. So they internalize it and don't talk about it. But since we are doing this, I believe it will create the platform and open up so that more and more people will start talking about it.
Interesting question. And I actually want to work out that for myself. But yeah, I would like to thank everyone. Tears, Esther, thank you for agreeing to come on. We are going to close this section of the podcast. Mo, thank you for being here on there with me as well. Obviously, the audience, thank you all. And but yeah, thank you. Now we're going to close it up.
Start doing in regards to helping our mental health not to become mental ill health. Thank you.
Who you asking the question to? Is someone specific or should someone pick it? Who wants to take it?
I can take the first one because I think do I think more about my physical health than my mental health? I'd probably more than likely say yes, but I think, for example, the gym and playing sports, that actually aids like with my mental health. So that's like a way for me to actually sort of, in a way, deal with what mentally I'm going through. So I think I do put more of a focus on physical health. I can't speak for others, but for myself, I'd probably say yeah.
What was the second part of the question?
So
Mental ill health.
Question is for everyone, number one. And number two,
Right.
do we think that we put, in regards to what we can do to make our mental health not being mental ill health? You know, everyone has mental health, but to make sure that it doesn't become ill health, what would you recommend?
Well, so to make sure mental health doesn't become mental ill health, I think it's finding the appropriate outlets that work for you. I think everyone has something that works for them. Some people may stay in on a Saturday and read. Yeah. Some people may need to have a live social life and be around people and just be having a good time. I think there are different influencing factors, as for example, I think Esther's highlighted. Yeah. You can't eat fried chicken every day like me. Yeah. So it's probably not going to help your mental health. Yeah. So you got to be very careful about what you eat, what you drink. I think who you associate with yourself around. As I say, aren't some of your 4 or 5 closest friends? Yeah, I think that has a part to play. And acknowledge if you see yourself having an issue, that you hold yourself accountable. Okay, what am I going to do about it? Or am I just going to let it deteriorate? Or am I going to take action myself and think, I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'm going to work it out.
So for me personally, I look at my mental well-being more than the physical, because when I'm in that zone, then I take care of my physical. And I've realized it's so with almost everyone. When their mental health is not up there, it's not at a state where they are in tune and happy with life, they let themselves go. How do we make sure our mental health doesn't become mental ill health? Is by looking at health in its totality. So your association, what you eat. I would take the blue zones. I'm so passionate about the blue zones. So these are 5 places in the world where people live the longest, the happiest, healthier lives. And one of the things they've realized is when people have connection with their society, belonging to a group, religious group or non-religious, but belonging to a group where you meet at least once in a week, family, sense of family, where you are in contact with family, you have a bond with them, you are happy with your family settings. We make our families, so it's not just your blood family. When they take care of the things they eat, they move a lot. So if we look at this in its totality, then we ensure our mental health is always up there and it doesn't become mental ill health. I hope that helps answer your question.
Any other questions?
Tears? Do you want to respond to that?
How you make sure that mental health doesn't turn into mental ill health? Oh, I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist. I'm an economist or a management scientist. The only thing that is about commonality is what is interesting to see is that in certain countries where, for example, there's a more social bonding and then through taxing, like in the Netherlands or in Sweden or in other Scandinavian countries, there's a larger amount of reporting on happiness. So one way by which you could potentially make sure that mental health doesn't turn into mental ill healthness is to create more social coherence and maybe institutionalize that.
Sorry, it may seem quite controversial, but I'm just going to put it out there. Don't you think that the more we focus on mental health nowadays, the weaker the generations are becoming? How do you find the balance? Because I'm not saying it was right, but there was a fortitude that came in. There was a strength. And most of the youth nowadays can't manage real world, can't manage real life. And we're so busy focused on, oh my God, how do you feel? How do you intend to use your platform to ensure that there's a balance? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, it's funny you say it because I've actually thought about that question a lot, and the answer is I'm unsure because I feel like the world we live in.
Repeat the question, please. Yeah, you thought about it, so just repeat the question.
Okay. The question is a long
However
question.
you phrase it the way you want to answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how I think, where is the balance between should we just be stronger, like we once were, like, essentially, or should we be falling into, we've got mental health now and sort of using it as an excuse in a way, in some bits. Where do we find the balance? So, I think it's really hard in the world we live in today because it's not always been a thing. I don't think mental health's always been a thing. Before, people used to get on with it and there wasn't really much conversation about it. But now it is a big thing, and we have social media and we have all this technology where if you say the wrong thing, then, well, if you say something against the majority, then you're the bad one and you're not now valid, you get cancel culture, all that sort of stuff. So it is something, the answer to the question is I'm not actually sure, I'll be honest with you, but it is something I would like this platform to try and find the answers to. I'd love to have someone who's going through mental health and others that really don't believe in it, and have them both on the platform and speaking about it and seeing the different views, because I think it is an important question to ask, to be honest, and I think I'd like to know the answer to it as well and how far we can take it. I hope that's all right-ish. Thank you.
What's your name? Norissa. So I think I'd love to get all of your thoughts on it. So I think
So is mental health an excuse for the kind of younger generation? Kind of this lack of kind of being toughening up, I think, as it was when I was growing up. I think one, social media definitely has is a key part of this, because people can sit at home and earn a living and they don't have to leave their bed. So they're not seeing the reality in the outside world. And that sometimes can, from a mental perspective, kind of you're not coming up against those obstacles. You know, when we're growing up, because I grew up at the time the social media started to expand, but when you're out there on the street day to day, when you're having to get up at 6 a.m., go to the office, yeah, deal with that passive aggressive, whatever's going on with these colleagues here, yeah, deal with that. Okay, you didn't even want to be there in the first place. You got to come up, you got to do it again the next day. You got to do it again the next day, yeah. The little money you have, you got to make sure it's going to the family. You're taking care of people over there. When you're dealing with all those different dynamics and you're out there in the real world, you know, you start to build a resilience. And for me, what I've seen is those who haven't had to do as much of that then start to have or are more impacted by some of these issues. And yeah, I think I'll conclude it there. And Tears, I'll hand over to you.
I think in terms of whether mental health is used as an excuse for some parts of the population is not the relevant question. The question is it a problem for the entire society? And I think what some groups are in more difficult situations, whether that's financially or with the future prospects, and whether or not that's then being vented through mental health changes, that is a given. The question is whether it in the future leads to missed opportunities for us for them as a generation, or for certain groups as a group, and for society or societies as a whole. And I think we will only find out in the future.
I feel we, the older generation, are the reason why these young people are going through what they are going through now. I've got an 11-year-old, and I watch him and his friends, and they can play all day on the computer. So they will call each other, organize play dates online. And I look at it and I'm like, where's the social connection? So what I do is I call the moms and I make them go into each other's homes so that they have the social interaction. Yeah, someone might curse here and there. You talk to them and they stop. But when they are online playing, it's interesting the things the children do. So I feel we have to help them. Otherwise, the future for this younger generation is scary. And like Mo said, because of online, how should I say it? Employment, or what?
Just being able to live in online.
And living online, people don't have. So we come back again to the social connections. If we're able to interact with people, then you get to learn how to live with others. You get to learn how to manage your emotions. You get to learn how to live, really. So I feel we need to help these children interact more with society, get them out there, so they don't become online. That's a word, online babies. Or there's a word for that. But yeah. So we have to help and end that.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Cezanne Poetess. I'm a visual and spoken word artist and author of the novel Journey of a Sister, which features my artwork and poetry. So how many dedicated writers do we have here today? Show of hands. Closet writer. Stuffed it in the drawer. Okay, so this poem is called A Dedicated Writer, and it requires a bit of audience participation. So see if you can fill in the gaps, okay? I want to hear you. Okay. I am a dedicated writer. A dedicated writer puts their writing first. When the inspiration's flowing, they flow along with it. They yield to the spirit and write. Even when it's inconvenient, they stop what they're doing to write. They could be walking down the street when the bolt of inspiration strikes like lightning. And then they know they have to reach for their paper and pen and write. They could be shopping, cooking, cleaning, washing the dishes, showering, sleeping. But when it happens, they know they have to stop to write. A dedicated writer gets up in the middle of the night to write. They leave ink stains on their sheets as their pen makes love to the paper all right. They could be writing poems, songs, or best-selling books. Doesn't really matter. As long as they're writing like a junkie needing their next fix, a writer just has to write. A dedicated writer writes and writes and writes and writes and writes and writes and writes. To a dedicated writer, writing is like making love. They get off by writing. To a dedicated writer, writing is like giving birth, hard, pushing. But when the beautiful baby, the end result, is born, it's worth all the pain. Writing can be quick and painless too when the inspiration's flowing. This poem was written in less than half an hour at 5 o'clock in the morning. Time's up. A dedicated writer also knows when to stop. Thank you. Thank you.
CenX, real talk
at the heart of your community.